everyone, this is Fashion Knowledge and my name is Beata Wilczek. I am a Berlin-based critical fashion practitioner and I work across education, research and strategy. I lecture on fashion, design and digital cultures and I run a consultancy and research laboratory called Unfolding Strategies. In each episode, together with my students and fellow researchers and practitioners, we discuss the fashion's most urgent issues and try to reimagine the socially just, sustainable and digital fashion futures. Hi, welcome everyone to the new Fashion Knowledge podcast episode. Today, our special guest is Chinouk Filique de Miranda. She is a Rotterdam-based design researcher and critical fashion practitioner. Her work is situated between the fashion system and digital cultures, and she is analyzing, translating, and visualizing how they intersect. Chinouk has collaborated with such institutions as Warehouse, Cooper Hewitt, National Museum of African American History and Culture, and many, many more. In 2019, she graduated from ArtEZ University of the Arts, where she developed her ongoing research project titled Algorithmic Gaze. I hope that today we will make sure that everyone knows what Algorithmic Gaze is, how it is connected to fashion. And I also hope that we will touch upon digital literacy and our awareness of one's agency and the fashion digital ecosystem. Welcome, Chinouk.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, a pleasure. I really like your work, and we spoke about it before, and I was very lucky to interview you before for my research. But I never really seen something that inspired my students so much. It's really been like a massive inspiration for them, your writing, your research. And I think also the fact that, you just not so long ago graduated, I think for them, it's very also admirable. And they can really, see themselves closer to you. So for them, it's quite exciting that I introduce your text in the teaching, either at university or also when I have meetings with companies. But yeah, I was thinking about our talk today, and when we probably met first time, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, there weren't so many conversations about tech and fashion, and now we have so much of it. So fashion and tech, or fashion tech, that became like a whole thing. Once what could be defined as dresses with LED lights, because that's what wearable fashion, tech fashion was in the beginning, today got very complicated with all discussions about metaverse, AI, algorithm, and so on. So maybe we can start by thinking out loud about how fashion and digital are connected, or where do they intersect?
Yeah, so fashion has willingly and unwillingly become inextricably linked with digital culture because both are part of our everyday lives. Both are a source of communication and both help us assert ourselves and our imagined identities in public space. So we went from what you just said, fashion and tech, meaning let's incorporate some hardware technology into fabrics to enhance our bodily efficiency, to a metaverse in which we communicate with and are impacted by the way we see and envision fashion, as in garments, but also in their social framework. And because we're now so connected anywhere and everywhere all the time, and this interaction, we're kind of approached as a full-time consumer. So for me, fashion online has always, or the online space, I should say, has always formed itself in kind of a safe space because it allows you to construct your own narrative. So either through self-publishing or posting on Instagram or having a blog, making your own website, or just being part of online subcultures, you can choose to present yourself or show off your unhinged, realistic self. But ultimately, digital culture allows for multiple ways of expressing yourself. And I think that's where and why it collides so well with fashion. But what we're experiencing now, to an extensive degree, is the digital space being commercialized or co-opted, which has made it anything but a safe space, in the sense that users are turned into a product. So almost every login, click, notification, confirmation ultimately guides us towards some type of consumption, and whether it is my time, my personal data, or an actual product, like something's got to give. And I think fashion in its multimodal forms online hones in on that.
Because you said it's like it's about consuming and also about being on one hand. So on one hand, you're doing those things, you're, I don't know, as always people say, expressing yourself, you're communicating, you're when you're doing fashion online, or yourself and fashion online. And then at the same time, it becomes consumption. So being becomes consuming, right? This is
yeah, they merged. They've totally merged.
And so, and in your work, like, because if you're interested in fashion technology, people sometimes think about very complicated things, and algorithmic gaze as a term can be a little bit scary, particularly to people who have nothing to do with tech and algorithms and maths. But in your work, you like focus on the very mundane activities, such as looking and scrolling at content. Why is it so important to this consuming and being together?
Because we now live with the notion that the individual, like in a consumer society, must be constructed in order to partake in this digital realm. I think its sensory experience therefore needs to be critically assessed. So I think power lies in the mundane. So power to condition, but also power to be conditioned. And we don't really overthink the mundane things we do on a day-to-day basis. And as such, we kind of discard these actions without questioning them. So this means they're also the easiest way to exert subliminal influence. So content-wise, we are exposed to an oversaturated landscape of visuals. So we scroll through a huge amount of images and impressions every day, and tend to only linger on the things that trigger us in some kind of visceral response, right? So somehow we tend to think, or at least I did, that only those specific images have some type of influence over us. But the recurring images, the styles, the advertising, if you will, we encounter through our screen culture conditions our behavior, and to a certain extent, thus also our consumption. So deciphering what you're seeing and putting that into a wider context helps us understand why we are seeing what we're seeing, so to speak.
Okay, so kind of to dumb it down, let's say that because you're talking about the subliminal aspect of it, yes, we do. So to kind of dumb it down, basically, let's say that I'm scrolling for content, and there are certain things that are more, I always like to use the word effective in this context. So let's say there are certain images or videos now, because there's more and more videos. So there's some kind of image, either moving or not, that affects a certain way. And I, for example, can recall a mug that I was very infatuated with, and this mug was stalking me on various social media platforms, but mainly on Instagram. And I really liked this mug. It was super impractical, very chunky, very like kind of, it looked like a big mug cloud. And it was so extremely overpriced. Do you know this mug? Have you seen it? I don't know.
I don't know. I think I have, but not like super.
It might be
sounds like a very cozy mug.
It was a very cozy mug. It's not advertisement, by the way. It was a very cozy mug, and this mug was very somehow seductive to me. And I also was overexposed to it. So there was this thing that we call in psychology the heuristic of representation. It's like with Taylor Swift songs. You hear it, or Ariana Grande, once, and there's a repetitive chorus, and you first don't like it, but after hearing it 20 times, your brain is like, oh, that's nice. So there is this massive power of repetition. And and I was thinking, what can I, obviously I can now, there are more options to opt out, not to see it, but nevertheless, at this kind of current momentum, I didn't know about any ways how to get rid of it, how to report it, or what kind of settings I can put in my smartphone to avoid it. Now, similarly, a very bizarre theoretical books are following me on my computer desktop on many websites. So, I was thinking, if it would be a person, we could put like a restraining order, but with the digital environment, we cannot do pretty much anything. So I think it's always a question, do we even have the choice to choose what we see? And if it's actually, you said culture that conditions it, or maybe it's actually companies that also are partaking and making culture, but they're the one conditioning us in that way. So yeah, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Do we even have the choice to choose what we see?
Such a big question. So when you click the terms and condition buttons on the websites we visit, we're basically waiving any type of online restraining order we could get, which at this point, I honestly hope someone comes up with a scheme or some type of version that we can employ, because we need it. But as you just mentioned, like, new media has allowed for this influencing to become much more unobtrusive than ever before. So it therefore creates the kind of the illusion of independent choice making. So the question, do we even have a choice to choose what we see? I mean, yes and no. So yes, we have a choice if we choose not to use online media, or only use it to research or find something like very specific, like we know where to find it and we'll look for it. No, if you're using social media on the regular, because when we utilize these digital tools such as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok to assert the way we think, feel, look, what we like, we subject ourselves to it's called kind of like networked habitus, which is basically a filter bubble conditioned by external and often commercial companies and forces to make it easier for companies to target us through promotional practices. So it makes you feel like you have a choice through account settings, tags, hashtags, search bars, etc. But based on your digital footprint, everything you see is kind of pre-curated to fit into a certain habitus, so environment, which makes it easier for your online persona to be put into a target group, which makes it easier for companies to kind of harass you with these promotions and images and consumptional goods.
Mm. But like, so if we bring it a bit to fashion or any creative industries, something that I often discuss in the past with people I work with is Pinterest threat, as I like to call it. So this kind of a sea of sameness, because there is this illusion there's everything out there, and there's only slightly, I think, curated is a very beautiful term to call those things. I think very often people think it's kind of costumized for them, but they don't think that they are perceived as a consumer here all the time. They're thinking about themselves as an individual, you know, a single unit. And this, you know, this threat is particularly visible in creative industries, where you have a bunch of people referring to visual culture nonstop in order to produce new things in this world, either 2D or 3D. In fashion industry, the most common thing is to create a mood board. So you just select some images that are somehow for you connected in order to extract some sort of mood or some kind of aesthetic or some narrative, and then you try to channel it into a garment or a collection, because these are those typical units you know, that designers do create in companies or individually. But what I see more and more often is that the particular group of people will be showing exactly same references, exactly same things. So it's like kind of becoming the sea of sameness. It's like always going to one tiny shop and cooking amazing new dinner out of it every couple of days, based on very, very basic products. And very often, even, you know, people working in creative teams or students are surprised that they bring such similar kind of visual content, and it's probably because there are people who, you know, live in the similar spaces, just like geographically, they have similar kind of situation and environment and context, so they're targeted as a similar group. So I'm curious, you know, how it affects people like consumers, makers, humans, and particularly those working in creative industries. You know, how does it impact our cognition?
Yeah, so I think it's spot on what you're describing, and it's basically all in rendition of what I then call the algorithmic gaze. But in short, I think its impact is limiting and polarizing, and it leaves so little space for creative exploration, because through this kind of like pre-curated digital landscape, that you just described, you're subjected to the algorithmic gaze, which basically describes the complexity surrounding the rhythmic ability of the algorithm, and it forms a new media infrastructure for what I like to call a modern form of visual propaganda. So this sense of democracy or creativity is lost when you encounter things you like that just revolve around what you seem to like, and as you're liking what you're seeing, you're not really almost allowed to venture outside of that bubble. And this new media infrastructure it's built around ways that trigger you to buy, right? So working with your preferences and your preferences only then closes kind of an imaginary gate for you to cross over to another store with different products that you find, and for you it minimizes the ability for you to find flavors that you might like or have never been in contact with, all in the means of cultivating habits in order to gain profit by these bigger companies, right? So what you do end up with is this consumption of communal aesthetics, I think it's called. It's like a whole theory of how everybody starts liking the same things, but also starts looking the same, and also then starts to create the same type of collections and with the same aesthetics or the same vibes, as they call it. It's kind of boring.
It's kind of boring, but it also, poses the threat to society and to the politics, because then we only talk to, people that we like and people that speak like us and look like us, the same mugs than us. And if we do that, then we are not a part of society. We're really living in a bubble. And this is not really, and then if we do it as designers, then we're not doing what I like to quote. This is an excellent book by Escobar. We're not partaking in design for the pluriverse, but we're kind of creating, a bubble for a few, or a bubble that's going to be imposed on the many as a kind of definite, amazing aesthetic. What kind of modernism was in a way. But as you were describing those flavors, I was thinking about, my experience of watching Netflix. Because if you switch to somebody's Netflix, it's going to be extremely different. And for example, it's also super gendered, and it will be like, oh, there's nothing to watch. And then you go on your own, you'll be like, oh, one of those 20 clusters of consumers, that's totally me. They really nailed it. But when I used to go to film festivals, my mother would always ask me, why do you go to this film festival? It's like a very alternative art house cinema festival, where I used to work for years. And before I used to attend, she says, why do you go to them when you don't like the most of the movies? I said, that's the point, because you kind of bounce, you think about why you don't like it, and it kind of, makes you think, makes you talk, makes you exchange ideas, and you kind of, I don't know, you grow and you develop your preferences from that. So
I mean,
please go ahead.
I mean, exactly what you're saying. Like, you learn from the things you don't like. Like, my dad used to tell me, like, with jobs, for instance, when I didn't like a job, or I didn't like the environment or the people, I don't know, when it didn't work out in the way that I imagined it worked out, he said, well, it's important because now you know what you don't like in order to find what you do like. And I think that is a good way to maybe look at online or like virtual spaces, for us to be able to honestly, or like democratically, I should say, explore this space. We need the good and the bad, because there's no fairy tale or way of living if there's only good, then there's no story.
Yeah, but it feels like this is the fundamental, the kind of fundament of UX, and the line that there's the saying that good technology, the best technology is the invisible technology, which is very scary to me, because that if you don't see what is it, it feels like, kind of secret surveillance control kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or this ease with which you buy something only with 2 clicks and you don't even know how it happened. So this also, I don't know, I'm kind of having flashbacks from, I don't know, stories from the past today. Sorry for that, but it's like,
No, it's fine.
I have a friend who never closes the fridge because her fridge was automatic when she was raised. So for her, all the fridges, they close on themselves, but this is not how most of the fridges work.
Really?
Yeah, it used to close itself. So she never closes the door. She really had to put a lot of conscious effort in actually closing the fridge, because she believed that the fridge closes itself. So it's like a very, it's a simple everyday object that we use. But the same happens with digital environment. We almost expect everything to open and close on its own.
That's
Everything
the
is
mundane. Yeah. That's the mundane in favor of efficiency. So everything with quote unquote efficiency is supposed to make these invisible technologies or these invisible strategies okay, because they make your life better, right? And they make it easier for you to navigate your way through the online space, which if they're so transparent, if they're so invisible, there's no transparency. No, honestly, yeah, which makes it hard for like me as an individual to understand why something is happening. But then I'm also an overthinker, so I use so that kind of stuff like lingers with me. So it makes me want to find out why. And if I can't find it, I always find it a bit dubious.
But then you said we should okay, so you're saying that the way the things are online, we should be kind of suspicious of them or like critically assess them. Like, why would we even do it, and how do you do it yourself?
In terms of knowing why and how stuff works online?
Yeah.
So I consider digital literacy as the main tool towards digital agency. So everything we see like has become clickable and immediately stoppable, as you just said. And through this construct of efficiency, we experience this one-on-one engagement with fashion through online media, right? And in doing so, it's presented to us as this highly personalized act of service. So I think our digital dimension needs us to actively interpret and deconstruct our online environment and its all-consuming mesh of interconnected networks as they operate in this economy based on aesthetically connecting to its audience by literally selling us our personalized scene. So in my practice, I focus on ways of gaining, or at least trying to uphold this agency. And through workshops in which we try to unpack and have a conversation about the good or bad of algorithmic mediation, I try to hone in on what it's like to have digital agency and how we can get there through digital literacy. So in these workshops or exercises, these participants are asked to observe, archive, and analyze their scrolling behavior, which allows you to create kind of an overview of this visual vortex that you're sucked into while using your phone or tablet or computer. So it then also allows you to cross-reference and see the development of your triggers, right? But the main thing that happens during these sessions, what I've noticed, is that it generates a conversation, which in my opinion is the most important part, because that's the part you take home, and those are the stories or thoughts or experiences that are meant to be shared beyond the screen. As for instance, the story you just shared about the refrigerator of your friend. So this digital literacy is important because a part of us communicates through this digital means on a day-to-day basis, and thus exploring the environment and especially lowering its threshold is important. And in a sense, active interpretation can be a liberating act.
How come? Deliberating it.
Mm,
And how does it liberate? Or
I
what do you mean
think
by
because it gives you, it gives you a sense, active interpretation gives you how
choice?
to easily say this. Yeah, it gives you or it helps you to render when something actually is a choice, or is your choice, or is your choice conditioned, or is it like, I think helping to know what you're seeing and why you're seeing something gives you like a little bit more time, or allows you, or yeah.
So if you could tell now to people who are listening, what would be like a one simple exercise to do at home to kind of practice your, your agency online, what would it be? What would be like your tips? What can people do apart from participating, I don't know, in a workshop?
Yeah. Okay.
What can one do? What can one do?
I'm not sure they're like super concise tips, but like, as the smart home and the smart environment plays into your day-to-day structure, and it hones in on that. So the main thing would be to try and deregulating your way of being in order to deregulate the algorithm that surrounds you. So there's small steps, such as switching up when and where you're browsing, what browser you're using, turning off tracking systems in terms of geolocations, using a VPN, using multiple email addresses for different accounts, knowing, I know that they're convenient, but once you stop using online wish lists and signing up for newsletters in order to receive discount codes, you also notice a vast difference. And in terms of habit, I like to turn off push notifications. But in all honesty, I think, or I'm convinced that the best way to exercise agency is through literacy. So knowing what you're seeing and why you're seeing, because all these companies will just keep inventing new ways to get our attention. And I think, was it Balenciaga that just announced that they're creating a dedicated business to explore marketing and commerce in the metaverse? So I think algorithms are getting more flexible, and the metaverse will get more and more all-encompassing. So as they're starting to act more like humans, it's important to uncover at least the algorithmic dialects.
Yeah, that's interesting, particularly, when we shift this conversation from Web 2.0 to the next step. So the kind of the new iteration and the metaverse. Have you thought about algorithmic gaze in the context of what is or what will be the metaverse and digital fashion?
Yeah, so not explicitly or like in its final form, but I do think we still now have the option to kind of like step away from screen culture, or like if we really have had enough of it, or if we feel like, for instance, our habits are too much conditioned by this, by the algorithms that follow us on a day-to-day basis, we're able to shut things off. Like, I'm able to still put my phone away or shut my computer screen off, or like be done with it for that day and go read a book. But if we become totally dependent on the digital public in order to be social, and kind of like start to envision this Ready Player One environment where the only social interaction we have is through this metaverse, then I think in terms of what the algorithmic gaze will turn into will be a way more sensory experience. So instead of just seeing, like probably also being able to feel, smell, sense. And and that also then being directed and conditioned by commercial forces. So yay.
Yeah, and I think this is on one hand very utopian and exciting to see this kind of sensory exploration and to see how this kind of digital sensory visceral experiences can move on, but then also how it's co-opted and how it becomes part of I don't know, potentially surveillance state. This is another take on
exactly. Yeah.
Dystopian, but yeah. Let's see how it will be. Thank you so much for talking to me, Chinouk.